This panel was recorded January 28, 2021, as part of the Human Trafficking Research Consortium, a 13th annual Human Trafficking Awareness Day event. The panel is titled, Housing, the Importance of Continuum of Care. The panel is moderated by Mr. Tomas Lares of United Abolitionists.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And we are so excited to begin this day, our 13th annual Human Trafficking Awareness Day, which is actually expanded to 2 days. And so we thank you for everyone who is joining us on Zoom or YouTube. And we are looking forward to a dynamic panel. Our panel today is the housing, the importance of the continuum of care. Many of us have heard that it's where do you put someone who's been victimized by sex or labor trafficking, right? Once they're recovered, once they're identified. And that has been an issue for many years. I've been involved in the anti-trafficking movement for several years. And that was the first thing that our law enforcement partners and first responders had stated was, where do you put somebody when they're recovered? And so we have an incredible group of stakeholders today that I'll introduce in a moment who have stepped up and who have really, it's a calling and a passion for these individuals that are here today. They are experts in their field, and it's a great privilege to have them. And so with that being said, I'm going to begin to introduce the panel. And if you'll please introduce yourself and the organization you represent and your position or title, just to begin. So, Dee Coleman.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dee Coleman, and I am the Executive Director of Samaritan Village, which is a safe house here in Orlando that provides long-term trauma-informed care to adult female survivors of sex trafficking.
Dee, Stephanie.
Hello, my name is Stephanie O'Connor. I am the state coordinator in Florida with Leticia's House Foundation. We are a long-term residential program that also works with adult female survivors of sex trafficking.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jill Cohen.
Hi, my name is Jill Bolander Cohen. I'm the founder of the Lifeboat Project. We are a three-prong housing process. We do have an emergency safe house. We have 2 crisis beds and 12 safe house beds. We also have transitional home for women that is full, and we also have an LGBTQ transitional home that is full. Then we have low-income housing, a triplex that we own too that we're renovating.
Jill, Dr. Phil Toll.
Dr. Philip Toll with Aspire Health Partners, and we have a 10-bed short-term residential treatment program for adult women who have been trafficked, labor or sex trafficking. February 1st, we celebrate 3 years that we've been in operation, and in that time, we've served about 160 women. We're a full continuum of care through Aspire Health Partners with all of the behavioral health care services that are necessary to work with survivors. So if from inpatient psychiatric services, if that's necessary, which is necessary from time to time, we focus on a 3 to 6 month length of stay. Survivors may stay shorter or longer depending on their clinical needs, really focusing on trauma and then the co-occurring disorders as a result, whether it's substance abuse or mental health issues. So intensive level of care with only 2 therapists with 10 clients. And we're really working on that stabilization and then moving to other settings like safe housing after they finish that intensive level of residential care.
Wonderful. Thank you, panel. And my name is Tomas Lares. I am the founder and president of United Abolitionists. So as we begin this conversation this afternoon, I'd like to really just know, how did you connect to each panelist to the issue of human trafficking? Like, what was your first encounter with maybe hearing something and kind of that aha moment that you had to do something? So Dee, we'll begin with you.
Sure. So I kind of have a unique journey in getting to where I'm at today as the director of Samaritan Village, in that I was in college in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I'm sitting in my home church in Southern California where a pastor had come talking about an organization she was starting where she was going to rescue women and children out in Greece and across the world out of this horrific situation. And she wasn't calling it human trafficking. And I was compelled by that. And I went back to college that next semester and changed my major, thinking that one day I would go across seas and help, rescue these women and children from this horrific situation that they were in. And then fast forward many, many, many years later, and I have always worked in the nonprofit sector. And I connected with Samaritan Village and was like, one day I'm going to volunteer. That's amazing. Still with a thought process in mind that the women that Samaritan Village was serving was not from Florida, let alone the United States. So that realization really woke me up. And I was like, this is a huge issue that's happening here to our, brothers and sisters, our daughters, our children. And so that's really what pushed me into doing the work that I do at Samaritan Village.
Thank you, Dee. So Stephanie?
This is a question that I've thought a lot about because it's one of those things that it was like, oh, it was here. No, it was here. And it hit me the other day that actually, if anybody remembers Invisible Children, I was involved with them since high school. And then there was the whole Coney 2012 thing. And it's talking about the child soldiers in Uganda. And so I think that's where it sparked it, was there's these, kids in Uganda being forced to be child soldiers. And so I think that was the beginning of it. And then I went to UCF and did my bachelor and master's in social work. And so that started the more recognition with it. And then in 2015, I went into the Peace Corps in Lesotho, Africa. And while I was there, I worked a lot with youth and working a lot with women and children. And while we did healthy youth and talking about HIV and AIDS, kind of recognizing more and more of the vulnerabilities that they were facing, and a lot of the women and children were facing because of being young children were a lot of times being, forgetting the word, but not forced, but or told by the parents and to go and get married young or have sex young. And so that kind of led into it. And then when I got back, I was looking at what to do, and I started volunteering with One-to-One Hope, which is part of Northland, and it's their response to human trafficking. And I became an advocate with them. And then in 2019, I became the state coordinator with Leticia's House.
Jill?
Well, it's been about a decade now, and I was in Washington, D.C. at a conference, and that's when I learned that I-4 was one of the most heavily trafficked corridors in all of the United States. And being a born and raised Central Floridian living right off of I-4, I said, this is unacceptable. And so shortly after I started doing some work, kind of figuring out where to go, Tomas and I met, and I started the Lifeboat Project. And then a few years later, in 2013, Tomas and I co-founded with a couple of others the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force, because we knew that we needed to have that great relationship with law enforcement in order to have that continuum of if they're arrested or what the situation was. But housing was always my focus. And now we have opened up to not only serve women, we serve men. And I would say that our clientele right now, even in the community and what is in our housing programs, are 50-50 labor trafficking and sex trafficking. I call us the United Nations. We have them from everywhere. So.
Thank you, Jill. Dr. Toll?
Well, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I've been working with Aspire for 20 years, and Aspire, which was formerly Lakeside Behavioral Healthcare and the Center for Drug-Free Living in Seminole, have been in the community for over 50 years, providing the full continuum of behavioral healthcare services. And so having the residential programs, it's really key to do a full and comprehensive assessment. So about 7 years ago, we had some funding specifically for adolescents who'd been trafficked. And so that was what first introduced me to the trafficking experience. And assessing trauma across the board, it's very common to find that some people don't even realize that they've been trafficked. And so when you're doing that comprehensive history, you learn of the experience of their trauma. And so hearing that and really needing to find a way for that intensive level of service to stabilize them. For our residential program, very often they were with the trafficker last night or this morning. And so they're incredibly raw and need that stabilization. And so recognizing the need before we can send them on to another level of care was really important. So across the board, we evaluate and assess for trauma specifically, and then explore what's the source of that trauma, and are able to receive referrals not only throughout our system of care, but also from not just the Orange County area, but the entire state of Florida for referrals. So when you kind of get ignited in prevention and intervention in addition to treatment, for people to understand what really takes place in the life of an individual who's been trafficked. I do a lot of training, and I live in Winter Park, so I do some training in there, and it's like, this doesn't happen in Winter Park. This doesn't happen. And it's like, it happens everywhere. And when you begin to explore that with them, they're amazed. So a big part of it is prevention. We need to take a look at how we can end trafficking, hopefully in our lifetime.
Thank you, Dr. Toll. So we know as well, and y'all mentioned already, which many people think that, when they think of human trafficking, they think of just sex trafficking, right? When we know there's also labor trafficking and domestic servitude. And so I know part of the reason the diversity of this panel is that you serve different populations. And Jill, you mentioned labor trafficking as well. So kind of, we're going to go down the line again of the population you serve. We know that anyone being trafficked, anyone who's been victimized, deserves restoration, deserves healing, deserves just all the wraparound services. But will you speak specifically on the populations you serve and why? And there may be an age range, there may be a variety. I know with Lifeboat and Aspire, even with minors at Aspire. But so Dee, would you start, and what population do you serve and kind of why, so we can understand?
Sure. So, well, if we had a ton of money, we would be able to serve all the populations, right? Everybody would be included. When we started 10 years ago, our founder saw the repeating cycle. She was a chaplain in the Orange County Jail and saw the repeated cycle of women on and off the street corners. So we serve adult female survivors of sex trafficking and sexually exploited. We leave that a little bit gray because, as Dr. Toll alluded to earlier, a lot of victims don't even recognize themselves as victims. So most of our referrals come from the Orange County Jail and other law enforcement agencies in the region. And actually across the United States, we've been starting to get more and more referrals from other states that are needing space for these women. So why we serve this population? One, that was just kind of the trajectory that we were on. And, we're hoping to expand and include some of the populations that don't get care. When we talk about survivors and victims and who's missing out of the conversations in terms of housing, Jill's one of the very few that are able to house LGBT. There are hardly any spaces for women with their children in custody. So that is who we serve. And I don't know if that answered the question.
So yes, so adult women,
yes.
Any particular age range, Dee?
18 and over. We have found that people that are ready for the type of program that we offer, which is fairly rigorous, is typically somebody in their late 20s and upwards. So the youngest resident that we've had was 19 and the oldest resident that we've had was 53.
Wow. So quite a range.
Quite a range, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone, and that same, in you saying that, Dee, it makes me think people at different stages of their life either are identified, right? Or get that help, right? It doesn't, there's no one age.
Absolutely. For a while, there was a period of time, I think right as I joined the organization, where the majority of women that were in our house kind of just there were in their late 30s, 40s, and the early 50s. And we'd often get a lot of questions of like, why do you guys have such older women in your program? Isn't human trafficking a young person's issue, right? We hear about children and young teenagers. And my response to that goes, first of all, we have to look at how long it takes somebody to identify, right? To be identified, number one, or then to even say, I've had this type of trauma and I need care, if we even get to that point. The other thing that is really big is that when we look at the women that we're serving, they have been, if they never got help, right? These are oftentimes women that were abused, exploited, trafficked when they were really, really young, and they fell through the cracks of our system, right? So we've just kind of taken for granted women that we see on the street, assuming that they've chosen that life, that it's one too many bad decisions with boyfriends. By the time they go, I need some help, or somebody has even finally looked them in the face and recognized them as a human being and say, you need help, they've gone decades of being abused and exploited. So what the work that we do at Samaritan Village is really saying, yes, we might be serving a population of women that are in their 30s and 40s and maybe even 50s, but we're dealing with trauma that often happened in their early teens and childhood.
That really moves me because, I know with the recent Me Too movement and other things that are happening in our society, right, in the United States and kind of resounding all over the world now for all that violence against women. And we know it's just not women, but it's like somebody turned on the light bulb. And so what a blessing that you're able to serve those populations. So thank you. Stephanie, same question of the population you serve. And if you want to just explain why.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of steal Dee's answer and just kind of put that in mine. But so my founder and executive director, Elizabeth Ameling, founded Leticia's House in Virginia, and about 7-8 years ago. And I'm not going to go, and she tells the story way better than I could, but she founded Leticia in Chicago when she was there with her daughter's Girl Scouts group. And Leticia looked like she was a child. Turned out she was an adult woman and who had been on the street. And long story short, they ended up helping her. And that was when Liz realized this was the calling and this is where she needed to go. She went from classical pianist to, I'm going to open up a safe house in Virginia. And so that's kind of where it progressed, of serving adult women and also adults from 18 and up. And we've also had quite a range of ages. The Florida house we opened up in 2019. So we're actually, this coming month is our 2-year in Florida. So we're relatively new in Florida. And but also the hope is as time goes and money and budget and all that, and the idea is we would love to expand too into helping other populations too. Thank you.
Stephanie. And I just have to say this too, for those who are watching or watch later, and for those that are here, that the panel today too, I know them, and to do this work has to be a calling. And I know that they answer the phone 24/7, and it is just somebody special. So, thank you for accepting that calling, all of you, because it is. It's not for everybody, right? And but your passion and your commitment have shown through the years. So I just want to thank you and acknowledge that truth. So Jill, your populations you serve?
So the population we serve is 18 and over. I had always done justice and peace work. And looking back over my life, I can kind of see where God was bringing me. We are not faith-based, our organization. We are faith-led. We have many different faiths within the Lifeboat Project. But so everyone's 18 and over. If they're trafficked at 100, we're going to help them. Hopefully, I don't ever see that in my lifetime. But so we do have LGBTQ. Right now, we have one that is someone that is transgender. We have another person that's transgender that's getting ready to come in. We have a lesbian, gay. We love them all, have them all. We have many from different countries, and Lifeboat has really become like a family. We respect each other. I only have 2 roles, and that role is treat others with respect, like you would want treated, and just be kind. I mean, it's not rocket science. And so that's basically what we focus on is adults, anyone that needs the help.
Jill, I know you're unique too, because you also serve labor trafficking.
And we serve yes, we serve.
Why is that important?
Well, I think in the work that I've done over the years, I've always been drawn to the immigrant communities, and I know the struggles that they've gone through. And especially with whatever your political view is, this last administration was not very friendly to immigrants. And so there was a lot of suffering that went on, and many people that were, traffickers are having a field day during this time. And so many people were hidden and afraid to reach out for help. But I knew that that's when I needed to really step the game up and get the word out that if you're trafficked, we have one survivor that came to work with me. And because I am raised in the church, I do a worshiping community on Thursday nights, totally separate than the Lifeboat Project. I'm a professional jazz singer and worship leader. And so I kind of wanted to continue that church girl. So this individual came to me with a pastor. They were from another country and they wanted to be a part of our worshiping community. Well, after she's around for a while and starts saying, hey, wait, that's me. Okay, this is me. Then we realized that she was being trafficked. And so, it's like you were saying, Phil, sometimes they really don't know. And, I think that's why it's so important to have housing and wraparound services, because when they do self-identify, we always know that the police are going to be out there doing stings, arresting people. That's a given. But for those that really self-identify, where can they go and provide those wraparound services? And so we say that, you're always a client of the Lifeboat Project. We have several community clients. I have one that calls me yearly because she needs to have an eye exam and get a new pair of glasses, to the others that need really extensive care. We are not a drug and alcohol place. We send them to Aspire if that's what they need. But for all the other services, that's what we provide.
Well, thank you, Jill, for serving those populations so needed. Dr. Toa, I know that you serve several of your populations throughout the years that we have worked together. You have Oasis. We've been able to work together on many different populations. Will you please tell us what you all offer?
Definitely. Well, Aspire is a full continuum of care for behavioral health care services, and long been working with trafficking survivors. This program, the Women's Residential Program that is designed specifically for adult survivors of trafficking, has been in operation for 3 years. We've had the beauty of being able to place clients throughout our system of care. So when these 10 beds are full, we don't turn the survivor away. We just place her in one of our other programs, because we have 3 additional women's programs, a co-ed program, a co-gender program in Sanford, and then we have a men's program as well. And we also serve the male population, but depending on the statistics for sex trafficking, it's about 85% female, 15% male, and there is no age range. The average age of entering the life is 11 to 14. So we are able to treat those adolescents as well. This particular program is for adult women. And when we really focus on that intensive level of care, our initial design was to be that, short-term stay, shelter stay, overnight, 3 days, wherever you might need to be. But we really found that that's not what we needed to be doing. They exist, and we partner with all of the providers in the Florida area and outside the state of Florida. But what was really needed is that intensive level of care. The significant changes that take place with the brain around trauma. 3 areas of the brain are impacted and change as a direct result of trauma, which is true for all of us. If any of us experience a trauma, the brain changes. However, with the human trafficking survivor, those brain changes are more significant or more intense, if you want to think of it in those terms. The first area is that fight or flight in the deep in the brain, the forebrain, with that idea of everywhere I turn, everywhere I look, it's life-threatening. And that's a real reality for survivors. That's a real reality for people who experience trauma. And so when you're trying to engage these individuals in care, and Tomas and I talk about this all the time, and others in the trafficking field, how to engage them. I always, when I do training, I get all the calls that come into Aspire for our human trafficking survivors, and I generally try to talk to all of them. And I can probably convince 50% of them to go to our facility for the HT screening, which is at our addictions receiving facility on Kennedy Boulevard. And we do that because many of our survivors need detoxification because substances have been playing a role in their trafficking, whether that was prior to being trafficked or as a direct result of trafficking, because that's one really great way to control people, is to get them hooked on drugs and then require that they stay with them because they're the supplier of the drugs. So we require that. So 50% of I talk to, I can get there. 50% who arrive there will go inside the building to even for the screening. Only 50% who go inside will actually come over to our program, and only 50% of those will actually stay. So that number gets very, very narrow, not because they don't want care, not because they don't want treatment, but because of that fear that anxiety, I'm not yet ready. And everywhere they turn is danger, literally in their mind, everywhere they turn. I ask you to make your bed, and it becomes a life-threatening experience, not because they want it to be, but because that's what the brain is saying to them. The second area is emotional regulation. So their emotional response is not equal to the circumstance. So you ask them to make their bed, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs, not because they're not nice people, but because the brain has changed as a direct result of trauma. And so that's what has to be looked at. The final area is the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex, which is, for all of us, our executive functions: reason, decision-making, judgment, mood, impulse control. And so when we're trying to work with survivors in a situation that maybe they were pulled out of the life last night, or this morning they were with their trafficker this afternoon, and we need to work at that. That's a long-term process, 2 to 3 years for the brain to heal from the trauma. And so we would look at survivors and think, well, you're just giving us a difficult time. And we can't treat them the same way that we treat other, treatment-resistant clients. It's not that they're resistant. It's that the brain has changed and the emotional issues are great. So looking at all of that, we realize this is long-term treatment. So I always tell people, and I do a group with our women every week. So this is our intensive care unit. You're in intensive care. This is extreme stabilization for a situation that needs great intervention. Medications if necessary, which is not an uncommon occurrence with depression, anxiety, and perhaps some other major mental illnesses. And then taking a look at how do we get you ready for the next phase. We used to think, okay, you're going to go from here and go into permanent stable housing. Well, guess what? The majority of them don't go into permanent stable housing right out of our program. And clinically, they shouldn't. They should be going to one of these other programs to say, this is the next step in your evolution. And I don't like to call it recovery. I like to call it journey towards wholeness. And what I say to our clients is that, you may never have had that because your childhood contributed to a situation where you never learned those things that you needed to have the rich life that the rest of us have, and you deserve it as well. Or as a result of your trafficking, you don't have it. So we're going to give that back to you. So in this stabilization, it's getting ready to put those things in place that you can move into a stable housing environment with people who know human trafficking, because we're not yet done in 3 months or 6 months. It's an ongoing journey, 2 to 3 years for that brain to heal. So those services are really key in engaging them to understand, because everybody, we're human. We want a quick fix. I want it done now. I want it done now. It's not. The brain changes slowly, but it can, in fact, heal from that trauma. So that journey towards wholeness is really all of those things that are necessary. So if we don't provide it ourselves at Aspire, then we're able to partner with all of our community partners, education, legal issues, reestablishing relationships with their children if they've been trafficked and they have children and they have a case plan around, reconciliation with those children. So any number of services that we can do that overall treatment plan and then assist them with finding. Many of them have not had the medical care. When they come in, we've had women diagnosed with cancer in our care because they weren't getting medical care. Their trafficker doesn't take them to the doctor. And so diabetes and all kinds of other life-threatening illnesses. And so it's key. Keeping them in treatment is key. Keeping them in treatment long enough to allow the brain to heal is key. And engaging them so that you're talking about that next step. So we're talking about that discharge plan. Where are you going next? And trying to really create that relationship and work with these people, in our multidisciplinary staffing, to say they're introduced before they ever leave the program. So you've got a relationship before they leave, which keeps them sustained in care.
Thank you, Dr. Toll, for that foundation of our next question and where we're going. And I think for those that are watching and listening, this is really key to understanding these populations, right? Because it's not a quick fix. And again, that's why I had mentioned previously that this is a calling, right? Because if we can go into that now, Dee, with what are the services that you're seeing that are important, knowing that it's not a quick fix, knowing that it's not overnight, knowing that someone may leave your program, right? And you've tried to do all the things right. And so if you'll talk about some of those key services.
Yeah. So I think the backbone of everything that we do is providing the therapeutic approach, right? And so I say at Samaritan Village, there are just some aspects of our program that, for lack of better language, it's kind of plug and play. We always know that this day is going to look like this. And one of the things that we do on top of planning out a really robust schedule that promotes healing mind, body, spirit, and soul is in taking a look at each individual woman that's there. It could be really easy and I say that loosely, to create a program, right, where these are the protocols, this is how we do it. You come in, you got to abide by all these rules, you got to do but that's not what being trauma informed is. And that's certainly not helpful with this population. They all have their unique set of traumas, triggers, and things that we're trying to address. And we want to build them up as an individual back into wholeness. I love what you said, Dr. Toole, about the journey to wholeness.
I want to say too, because you just hit something so key in that. And I think that is why the understanding of working with these populations, a lot of times we have maybe corrections mentality, right? Or the addictions mentality, right? It's this or this. And so you're hitting something super key in that journey, right? And meeting that woman where she's at, and it has nothing to do with compromising or devaluing your core values. So keep going, but I just wanted to just pause because I think you hit a nerve.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that, it's looking at the woman and saying, what does she need? What does she need today? What does she need a week from now? Our clinical director, she puts together our programmatic schedule on a quarterly basis. It would be easy for her to map out a year of therapeutic services and say, here's what it's going to look like for the year. We're done. I'm going to go take a 2-week vacation. Instead, what she does is she's meeting with the women every single week, multiple times a week, reassessing them, talking to them, getting to hear what they feel like they need. And every quarter, we're then looking at our schedule and saying, yep, we need anger management, right? Or we need to do equine therapy. That would be really healing for this specific woman or this group of women that's currently in the house. So we're walking that journey of healing with the ladies. It's not just laying it out and kind of making it a black and white scenario. One of the other key things that you said was because the journey is lifelong. So we turned 10 years ago in 2019, and in that moment, it was very celebratory of that, wow, we've been doing this work for such a long time and we've seen all these women's lives changed and they're going on to do great things. I rallied all of the women that we could get in contact with that had ever stepped a foot in our house, whether they graduated the program or not, and basically said, hey, when you left Samaritan Village, whether that was at the end of our program or somewhere in the middle or at the beginning, what is it that you needed? What is it that you needed? And they all came back with two things. The two key answers were we needed more housing. We felt like when we left Samaritan Village, if something happened, we would hear these stories of I was doing really great, and then I got laid off, and then at that point I couldn't pay my rent, and so now their living situations were still very dysfunctional. And then the second thing that they said was we felt like we lost our village community. And so out of that became our plan to expand our housing, of which we were able to get a second house, and we're on our way to a third. So we will be able to serve 15 women very soon. We started with 6. Well, we started with 4 and then 6, now 9 and almost 15. And then started a SOAR group, which is a survivor-led peer group. That meets twice a month, and they come together and we bring in an expert facilitator to talk through a topic that they want to hear about. That could be relationships, how to have a healthy sexual relationship after you've dealt with that type of trauma, right? And then the following meeting of that month is some sort of fun, engaging activity to build friendship and community and support. So those are some of the things we do outside of just our core Safe House program.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for laying that out. Stephanie?
Yeah, for us too, it's you realize how important in a program there's a level of structure that's super important, because structure is safeguard for the population we serve. But there is also, like Dee was saying, that need for individualized, and we're fortunate in that we are small. Leticia's house, we can have right now we're 4 to 5 women that we can serve, which really gives us that ability to serve, to do the individualized support. Because again, like Dee said, everyone comes in from a different background. Some have family situations that were healthy, some weren't. Some have children, some don't. And so everyone comes in with different worries and other things going on along with their trafficking, trauma from the trafficking, but everything else. I mean, we have women who have their children are in the system, and so they're trying to deal with that. And so, to deal with their trauma when they're saying you have 6 months to get this done, there's a whole other level of stress. And if we don't focus on that and that need that is present with them and that they're identifying, we're not going to be able to answer anything else that they're going to. So we have to meet them at where they're at, meet their basic needs, meet them where they're at, and then then be able to continue. My goal with anybody who comes in is when they leave, and whether it's when they finish the program or not, I don't expect you to be 100%. I'm okay. Everything is great. I have no trauma. But the idea is you have the resources and you have the community built up and you have the tools to be able to continue on. And when you go on by yourself, we're still going to be there. But when you continue on, that you have those tools for when you maybe get into a situation or when something like when you're laid off or and can continue on. One of the things too that we're is it being a trauma-informed house, and then also meeting where they're at, meeting medical needs too, like we were talking about earlier. We have some amazing partnerships that we've been so lucky to have, where we've been able to get women with root canals or even who need to get dentures and been able to get that, because for a lot of these, women, when they come, if you don't feel good, or if you don't feel like you look good, you're not dealing with everything else too. You need to sometimes feel the part to then be able to work on what's next as well. And so we've had some really amazing to help with that as well. And that's a huge importance. Yeah.
Thank you. What I'm hearing this afternoon is a holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's key. And that's what's successful. And I think, it is what it is, but I think a lot of our systems in the past decades, or things that have been built on, haven't been able to have that opportunity to be holistic.
Yeah.
Right? It was this or that.
Yeah.
Right? And some of that's generational thinking as well.
And one of the things too of that I love about in Leticia's house and where we're at is we are new in Florida, and there is, and just in general, you always want to reflect, what can we change? What can we do better? How can we grow? How can we best serve this population? And the one thing though, I've realized that is a constant, and I'm so grateful for my staff and our volunteers and our community, is that the way you care for the woman and like the love that I see everyone have for the woman does sometimes so much more than everything else. It's that support, and especially when they leave and they've developed the support system that will follow them, their mentors, that is huge in their recovery and where they're going at, because sometimes it does more than other things that I've seen, is that community support.
Thank you, Stephanie. Jill, I know you had mentioned, and I think you've, as I've known you too, having that holistic approach, and even for those that are in your care right now, but also all those relationships you've built, what are some of the things that your program is doing that are putting those wraparound services?
Well, it's a fluid program, that's for sure. Sometimes we think, yep, this is the way it is. We have it written in our manual, and then whoop, nope, we're going to erase that. And it takes a different turn. So we have the Compass program. And one of the survivors said when they came in, it's like, I just want safety, I want to heal, and I want to grow. And so our program is safe, heal, grow. And it is like and like they were saying, it is so individualized, because when you have someone comes to you from another country, or you have someone that doesn't even have a GED, maybe finished the 9th grade, then you have some with a master's degree. I mean, you can write it down that you think that this is what you're going to do today, but let's talk about finance. Okay, we're going to have a class on how to manage money. Well, come on. I mean, some haven't even seen money, but then there's others. I have one that has a finance degree. So it has to be individualized. And so we've created this ISP, an individual survivor plan, and each of them will move through those 3 phases at different times. Now, here's the problem that we see. Some of the other survivors want to be moving faster than the others, and they're not there. So then that can cause a lot of problems. But I think when you're transparent with them, and sometimes you got to talk many, many times with them to try to get it through their heads, that, it's your individualized journey. Don't worry about what Johnny or Sally's doing. It's your individualized. journey. The other thing I do want to say is that all of us, and really it's just pretty much all of us in this community that are really focusing on housing and wraparound service. But it's so important for all of us to be on the same page, because we do find that some of the survivors are, I don't like what they were doing, or they wouldn't let me do this, and that one lets me do that. And then they want to hop from organization to organization and badmouth each organization. And I think that while we still want to have the confidentiality, it's important that we all stay on the same page to say, what is the best care that we can give this person? Because sometimes truly, and I never like to doubt a survivor, I have one that I 100% do not believe that she was trafficked. I think she's mentally ill, and she's older, and she's working the system and causing a lot of trauma no matter where she goes. So it's important too that in the community, service providers work together to be able to provide that continuum of care and say, hey, you know what? I really can't provide that. Can you do it? Let's work together and partner on getting this person the best care. So
that is actually a strength, Jill, not a weakness, because we recognize what we're good at, right?
Yep.
Or what, some will say God called you to, and where, you're staying in that lane. And so you're being faithful to that.
Yep.
Thank you. Dr. Toll, some of the services that survivors are receiving?
One comment I want to make first, just to recognize too, on this journey towards wholeness, that in attempting to engage the client, the survivor, sometimes they're in and out, and that installation of hope and that establishing of trust is to say, maybe it's not going to work right now, but if you need to come back, please come back. So give us a call back. We do receive women back who've left after an hour or 2 days or 2 weeks, and we'll receive them back. Orange County funds our program, the residential program for trafficking. It's only small, 10 beds, but the admission criteria is pretty broad. Resident of Orange County, involved with law enforcement in Orange County, or homeless in Orange County. And so very generous in understanding the needs of the women. So addressing what needs to be addressed, and it's that holistic approach. It's got to be. We're going to focus on an intensive care because they have major issues. When you talk about self-esteem and self-worth, when you talk about, that's the very thing that traffickers use to control, is to destroy their sense of who they are as people. And so when they come in believing they don't have the rights, our women say, I deserve this. And we know that's common. The literature says that, survivors believe they deserve what they got. And the goal, the moving them past that you deserve this experience is sometimes very difficult. I find that they're not angry with their trafficker. They blame themselves, they're angry with themselves, and then they're angry with the helpers, the caregivers. And so we need to move them out of that to say, let's talk about who's responsible for this. So then taking a look at that holistic approach, we do a comprehensive assessment. So yes, it's going to be the intensive level of treatment, the clinical treatment, because it's a level 2 residential license for substance abuse services, but co-occurring as well. And then what are the psychosocial determinants that brought you to this place? Housing is key, and we're going to talk about that when you ask me what we really need in the community. But also legal issues, education, employments, setting them up. They come in oftentimes with nothing other than the clothes on their back. And so we do have community partners that are very incredibly generous with what they bring. And in the particular residential program, women who've never experienced, a Thanksgiving dinner. And one of our behavioral health techs actually created the menu with the clients, and they decided what they wanted to serve on Thanksgiving Day. She came in, she prepared the meals with the clients. They asked, is it okay if we have set up the table in the common area rather than in the dining room? And she brought in her china, and it was a beautifully set table. And you would have thought, that we'd given them $1 million, but they had never experienced that. And that's that piece to say, you have every right to experience normality. And so that goal is really key. So collective issues, that many of which we can't solve or resolve when they're with us, but we put that on their treatment plan anyway to say, prepare, this is the first phase in that, and it's going to happen a little bit later. We have students who are in virtual school and completing their GEDs or we have one, even though she's over the age of 18, that's completing her high school education while she's with us. So it really is that full spectrum of services, identify what they are, again, very individually designed, and your pace is going to be your pace. So you may be there, 2 months, you may be there 4 months, you may be there even a year. So it's really been key to identify those and connect them to the right next level of care.
Well, Dr. Toh, I think you stole my notes, because now you just introduced the next topic, and that's community, the importance of community. So Dee, you had mentioned as well that just the Samaritan village, even your name says community. Why is community so important for these ladies?
Well, I think it's important for these ladies. It's also important for our community as a whole. I think I'm very passionate about informing and educating all of us on how much this issue is not an isolated to them issue, and it affects our entire community. When we look at mental health, when we look at affordable housing options, when we look at the opioid epidemic, it goes far beyond just a survivor, right? And just the situation that she's been in. So when we look at the community, that's one of the reasons why I do love our name, because we are a village, and it's not just Samaritan Village, it's not just Aspire, it's not just Lifeboat and Leticia's house that can help these these in an isolated way. We need law enforcement, we need mental health services, we need people that come in and teach vocational skills. We need places like UCF and Valencia to open their doors to survivors and provide access to education in ways that they would not have otherwise. So in terms of community for these ladies, it takes so much to pour into them that it's absolutely necessary that we are collaborative and are working with all sorts of entities. When we talk about what do survivors need, even beyond a program like Samaritan Village, a long-term restoration program, when they leave us, they still need doors of opportunity vocationally. Of course, when they leave us, they've got a job, and some of them are back in school and things like that. But those are very difficult things for them to find. We had one lady, we never kick a lady out. So even when she kind of gets to the graduation mark, we'll ride it out with her until we can make sure that she's in a safe place, that her next phase of recovery is where she needs to be, that she is working. And so, we had one woman stay with us for over 24 months. Actually, I think it was 26 months, because because of her record was holding her back from being able to obtain housing in a safe place. So we needed a legal team to help her walk through the expungement process. And that was, it's not overnight. So I feel like, we're kind of reiterating all that's been said here, but when we think about what it takes to live our lives on a daily basis and how many entities we interact with, right, to live the comfortable lives that we do, survivors need that and 10 times more.
Thank you. Stephanie, how does community look at your place, or what are some, maybe the supportive communities?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think everything is going off what Dee said, but it's community is everything. Like I was saying earlier, you within our program itself, I mean, like I was saying earlier, the volunteers that you have, the staff, everybody being in community, you need, and then even outside of that, and as a community and as a whole, of what is our approach, how are we working together, to end this, to continue providing those, what services are there, like we said, medical and dental and all those things that really can add up. And that they can also have when they leave, at Leticia's house, we're going to cover your medical, but what about when you leave, to still be independent, but to have those services and everything to continue with their health. One of the things too, I always say, and I speak a lot about, is we have our house managers and staff and everybody at the house, and that's great. And there's such a great community and loving, support, and all my staff obviously loves the women, and we love hanging out with them. But also sometimes in our role that we play, they need other people. And so that's where the mentors that we have from outside come in and are crucial, because they can love us all day, but sometimes you need a break. And to have the other people that, again, when they leave, that they have to go and they can come back to us, and I'm going to be there, but they also have somebody else that they can go to. And then this volunteer who came in and helped with finance, that they can touch base after they leave, because some of where we've seen with the ladies that we've come in, we have people who come in with college degrees, and we have some that have come in and needed to get their GED. And so having that wide range of those resources, again, within the area is crucial.
Wow. So it sounds like you're really equipping them for a lifetime of success.
Yeah.
Not just one thing or one period.
Yeah. Our whole kind of mission is about going from a traumatic past, or building the bridge from a traumatic past to a positive future. It's not just about, our program and where we are. It's about the rest of their lives. It's about their forever and being set and in a positive motion for forever.
Wow, thank you, Stephanie. And as y'all are saying this, it reminds me of how important relationships are, right? And how, so many times in life too, there may be broken relationships, maybe in family, or maybe, sisters aren't talking anymore. There's a fallout, and how hurtful that is, right? And how disconnected one may feel. And so, Jill, I know as well that you have formed a community at Lifeboat. And if you'll just talk about the importance of community, maybe some of the glue that you're using to keep that going.
Yes, we all need a tribe, and we all need a safety net. And that's what we try to provide. We've had survivors that have left. My one special person has been with me 4 times, and she's coming back again. But I just don't give up on her. I know she's eventually going to get it, but she knows that she can call me no matter what time it is, and then I'm going to pick up that phone and I'm going to be there. Is it the healthiest thing? I don't know, but I just know that I love her and I want to be there for her. And maybe one day it's going to click. But I'm also a Rotarian and very involved with my church. And so I think when you take the knowledge and the wealth of the people that are within our community and that you pull them in to help mentor, it's amazing the talents that these people have. So as a professional singer, I also play the piano, and I have a piano at my facility, at our office facility. And one day, one of the survivors came up to me and said, "Hey, did you know that I played the clarinet?" I said, "No." And so she pulled this clarinet that she had brought with her one day. And I said, "Well, come on." So we went over and sat down, and I played, and I almost fell off the piano bench. I thought, let me make a phone call. So I called the conductor of the Maitland Symphony Orchestra, and I said, you got to hear this woman. She's incredible. And so now she plays with the Maitland Symphony Orchestra. And so she's got a community of people that she loves in music, that because she was brought up in the church. And so we have those relationships. I have another survivor that came to me, didn't want to hear about God. Where was God when I was being raped and pillaged? But I think through the actions and the love and the close-knit that we have, we're so far out of the box, you can't even find us. And I think that that's what they love about the Lifeboat Project, is we build community. I take them shopping, let's go hang out. Sometimes my program director says, boundaries, Jill, boundaries, we have to have boundaries. But I do love them like they're my family, and I want them to see wonderful things in life. I do know when I'm in over my head and when I have to really reach out to get help. But I think that the survivors have also realized, you know what? I love what they're doing, and this is just not a fit for me. And instead of wreaking havoc on everybody and traumatizing the other survivors, I'm just going to leave. But eventually they do keep in touch with us, and many have come back. I have one that was not ready, and she is back. She does have a child. And I thought, no, I'm not going there, not going there. And of course, I broke down and I'm going there. So she has a child that's under 3. And so we co-parent with the father, and the child stays with us back and forth. And they're a ray of light to bring around. So now we do help women with a child up to the age of 5, one child. I know my limits. And yeah, so. And that brings a whole other community for those people that really want to work with the youth, because so many people, oh, I just love the kids. And oh, isn't it sad that they've been traumatized? But they seem to forget from 17 to 18 is 12 months. And not a whole lot's changed since then. And so we still have to care for them. And so I love community. You know that, Tomas. I am always out in the community trying to pull people in. It's difficult right now with COVID, but But this has actually been one of our best years that we've ever had. So people are stepping up to help. That's exciting.
Thank you, Joe. So inspiring, encouraging, your words. What another common thread that I'm seeing today is that I know you're all people of faith, or your spirituality is important to you, and how that can be such a key ingredient. And I know all of your programs and know you as well, that you accept whoever comes, right, as they are, and in so many faiths, that's just the key, right, is showing truly God's love and compassion. So thank you all for doing that too. I know that's an important part of your work. So, Dr. Phil, what is some of the things that you see in community, maybe at the center, and that you have established?
Most of it's already been said, but it really is key that you have community partners, because you can't do it all. And recognizing that just the overwhelming needs, Dee referred to the early childhood trauma, the ACEs, that aversive childhood experiences, that really contribute to greater vulnerabilities, not just for trafficking, but for a number of issues in our lives. And so doesn't mean that you're guaranteed going to have a trauma, but the increased number of those adverse childhood experiences, things like neglect, abuse, a parent incarcerated, a parent with a mental illness, a parent with a substance use disorder, foster care, a parent living with a medical condition, a chronic medical condition. All of those are contributing factors that may create greater vulnerability. And so as one provider, you can't do it all, but you do that assessment, you understand what their needs are, and then you prioritize those. When are they ready? And they may be a little more, maybe they think they're a little readier than they are. And so part of that is, let's try it then and see where we go, and let's take a step back. As a therapist, I really say to people, it's okay to take a step back. Taking a step back is not a failure. I'm not going to thwart your efforts to get out there, but let's take a look at what do you need, and let's put the pieces in place and the steps in place. And that's with our partners: medical services, dental services, vision services, educational services, legal services. We had Orange County Drug Court call us, and they're working on. They don't have an official human trafficking court, but they have additional services that they can provide to those that have been trafficked. And our clients aren't a part of that court, but she called because it's part of Orange County, and she said, let me take a look with your client's permission to see, is there any way for us to help to overcome some of the fines? We're a safe haven. So under the age of 18, Florida is, that you can't be prosecuted for prostitution. But there's not that many states in the union that do that. And in Texas, they're a safe haven, but it's only at age 14. So many of our women have legal backgrounds, not because they were prostitutes, not because they did something wrong, but that's what happened when they were pulled out of the life and they were prosecuted. The other thing that sometimes happens is pushing them to participate in that level of prosecution before they're psychologically ready. And so the partnerships really need to see, let's educate everyone about, here's our survivor, here's what he or she needs, here's the level of trauma that they've experienced, and how do we create that environment? So it's our partners communicating with one another, and I'm a therapist by training, so obviously with releases of information, we're sharing that information and we're building that treatment plan. So we're not it by ourselves, so it's got to be community.
Dr. Toll, will you mention a little bit about the trauma group you do? Because I believe you're building things that you have stated, a community there, and the dynamics of that group.
Well, we really refer to in understanding the trauma and the number one, the neurological changes that take place. And sometimes these are shocking numbers. And I realize, I get pretty passionate about talking about, behavioral healthcare in general, but human trafficking. And I'll be talking, I might be at a conference and meet someone, or even out for the evening, meet someone and talking about what I do. And suddenly I see they glass over. And I'm like, okay, Phil, you said too much. But when we take a look at the level of trauma that they've experienced. So if you take a woman, for instance, who's been trafficked and very conservatively trafficked, 5 men a night. That's very conservative when we talk about trafficking. Then I would say, and it's pretty rough language to say, she's been raped 1,800 times in a year. If it's 10 men, which is much more likely, it's over 3,600 rapes in 1 year. If she's been trafficked for 5 years, it's over 12,000. If she's been trafficked for 10 years, and many of our women have been, it's over 40,000 rapes. Now, we all know a woman who's been sexually assaulted, and a very difficult experience that is, and whether or not she ever can completely overcome that experience. But 40,000, 1,800, How is it that we expect them to wrap their head around dealing with that life circumstance, that heinous experience that most of us can't even imagine? And so when we talk about the changes that take place in the brain because of trauma, we've got to meet them at the trauma. And that's what's really key. So when you talk about community, and so I do group every Wednesday morning with the women, because I want to be present to say, let's understand why that's occurring. Let's understand what you need from one another in this process of healing the brain from trauma. And so when we don't understand that, and so when we talk about what we need to do in the community, it's educate people to say, you're expecting her to do something that she can't do. She's expecting herself to do something you can't do. Even our staff may be expecting them to do something they can't do yet. So we've got to be that bridge, so that community is that bridge. So when a team member says, you know what, I'm a little overwhelmed with Jill today, she's really on my last nerve, step away, hand the baton to someone else and let someone else step in, because at that journey, I can be present to do what I need to do to help.
Thank you.
Tomas, I will say on that, Phil, that sometimes when they do get frustrated with staff, it's amazing how the survivors can come together they've got that language and they've got those coping skills, because like you said, when you've been raped that many times, and this goes for the men, they have a way that they can calm them down. I mean, they can trigger them quick too, but they also have ways that they can calm them down that staff just really needs to back off and let someone take care of it.
So do you tell me a success story? I know you have probably many, but one of the stories that just sticks out and that you want to share today.
Yeah, so many stories stick out. Actually, when Jill was talking about the clarinet, it made me think of a young woman in our program who came up to me one day, and it's like, I actually came up to her when I first started in my own ignorance. I was like, so I popped down on the couch next to her. What do you want to do when you leave Samaritan Village? What are your dreams, hopes, desires? And she's like, she had just gotten there. I started and she had entered the program around the same time. And she was like, what are you talking about? Right. 6 months later, she runs up to me as I'm at the safe house and she says to me, Miss D, do you remember when you asked me what I wanted to do with my life? And I was like, no, but what do you want to do with your life? I don't remember that. And she goes, well, you had asked me what I wanted to do. And I told you I didn't know. And she was at the house. She always wanted to take over dinner. She wanted to always make the dinners for all the ladies. And so she was a phenomenal cook. Like, she was amazing. But what was so beautiful about the conversation, she says to me, I remember when I was a little girl, my dad used to own a restaurant and he would pick me up and put me on the counter and I'd get to be his sous chef and I would chop. And that's where I learned to cook. And she had this like natural genetic given, ability. And because of that, we were able to put her in a program. So that's just a really sweet story. But I think another story really quickly was in the middle of 3 months into her joining Samaritan Village, we had another woman who had been estranged from her entire family. They didn't even know that she was here in the Orlando area. Her oldest daughter passes away from a drug overdose. And at that moment in time, our entire village wrapped around her and we sat vigil for 24 hours every single day for 31 days while her daughter sat in a coma in the hospital. And they were making a decision on whether they needed to remove her from life support. It was beautiful to watch our village come around her. But more importantly, I said, if I'm a mother, if there was ever a reason for me to keel over and make the wrong decisions or go back to bad habits or even take myself out, it would be to lose my child. It just feels like the wrong order of things. But to watch that moment in time, actually, she began to use all the tools that she had acquired in the 3-4 months that she'd been with us to push herself through. And she is now doing phenomenal, reunited with her other daughters, is now a house mom at a transition halfway house. I mean, when you talk about a bright light and a spirit, she is those things. And if there was ever a reason to have been taken out, it would have been that. And she pushed through. So wow. Those are my stories that just always get me.
Beautiful. Yes. And I think you got everybody with that. Thank you for sharing. Stephanie, a success story that sticks out or two?
Well, I just want to share, it's a success in the making, and it's just what's on my mind. And it's just when we were talking about individualized earlier, and while our program is, we don't really have a maximum because we know that people heal at different times. we say we're a minimum of 10 months. But one of the cool things is having that ability and recognizing the individualized support, where we've had a woman in our program and for months. I mean, it's been so much fun to watch how she has grown and taking charge of her own recovery through, different substance abuse groups and individualized substance, plus working with her counseling. And it's stuff that she kind of put forth that effort of like, I need this and this and this, and I'm going, in my Celebrate recovery and everything. And she has family that been, because of the extensive years of trafficking and substance abuse and being throughout the U.S., that some of the family relationship has been a little bit strained. So that's been something she's been working on as well. And recently she had her father needed some surgery. So we were actually able to, just this past weekend, drive her up to go there. And the cool thing with that is, while it's still in the making and it's still all new, is seeing where has been, and to be able to walk alongside her while she's going to be in this for an unknown time because of the recovery process. But she's also been, her parents who are elderly had her son. And so to reunite with her son and getting to see that, but seeing how she is still progressing and doing everything that she's supposed to be doing and that we kind of came up with before she left, to continuing with her service. So I'm excited to see it continue to go, but it's a fun journey.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Jill.
Well, I just have so many. The one with the girl that's playing the clarinet, making the dean's list in a short, in the short summer semester. We have an organization that stepped forward about laptops this Christmas and new clothing. We have 8 survivors that just returned to college or for the first time 2 weeks ago. So that is just so exciting. My very first client that I've had, I think probably 7 years ago, she was getting just ready to age out, and she was from another country. 10 times she took the GED, and it wasn't the lack of that she was smart. She spoke another language. And so writing the essays was extremely difficult. She just couldn't get past that, but she got past it. She got a job. She works part-time. She just finished her AA and she's going on to finance. She rolls up at my office last month, got herself a new car. She's doing fantastic. When I started this program, I wanted to have something called a haven home. And it's actually been our most successful. It's basically where someone in the community, it's kind of like adult foster care, and they have taken her in. She's been with them for 7 years. I don't think she'll ever leave. I tried to get her to move into one of the transitional, but she's good there. She's thriving. And, so she's just one that I'm just so extremely proud of. What is extremely disheartening is I just received another client last year from the same trafficker. So sometimes if they don't, that's why it's so important to have relationships with law enforcement. While we don't want to traumatize the survivors, we've got to get these people off the street. So over a 7-year span, how many people have been trafficked under this psycho? And lots. I have 2. But they're thriving. The trauma is real. They have incredible therapists that they see. And again, our community comes together and we do what we have to do. But they're all success stories to me. And sometimes when they leave, they come back. And our one girl that left a few years ago, she came back to me homeless. And she said, I've hit rock bottom. And I said, I knew that's what it was going to take. But she goes, nobody wants me. I said, I want you, but I needed you to want to be here and to move to the next step. And she's thriving. She's making great grades in college now. So yeah, they're all success stories to me.
Thank you for sharing that, Joe. Amazing. Dr. Toll?
One particular case comes to mind, and was got a call from a hospital in the area. And this young lady was a psychiatric hospitalization again for yet another suicide attempt. And she was just a couple of weeks past her 18th birthday. And so we were able to take her in. And the history is that, 56% of individuals trafficked are trafficked by family members or people they know well. And this young lady was trafficked from the age of 2 by her father, who first had sex with her himself and then passed her around and started collecting money, and never had a minute of formal education. Not a minute. She had never spent a minute in public education. And so she had taught herself to read and to write, and very small stature. When she came in, her hair was hanging in her face. She wouldn't make eye contact with you. And you could tell she was, very much disengaged from life in general. And over short, with intensive level of care and intensive services, you could tell she was starting to feel a little bit better because her hair was out of her eyes. She'd make eye contact with you, and then you sparked her interests, and so we enrolled her in GED program, and the GED instructor, let us know that she had scored and she passed, the English portion. She had passed with the highest grade this GE teacher had ever had, with no formal education whatsoever. And we had provided the psychiatric services, and I saw the psychiatric provider, and he said, "I thought that your services were for adult women." And I said, "They are." And he said, "But the client that you sent over the other day, wasn't she 12? No, she was an adult woman, and that's so she had failure to thrive because she didn't have enough food to eat while she was growing up." And so being able to pull them in and to create all of those experiences. Now, was she done when she left us? No. But by the time she left us, she had found an interest in sewing. So, in group, she'd be sewing. And she'd, "Oh, look, Dr. Phil, I made these pants." I'm like, "You made them? First of all, what'd you make them out of? Where'd we get the stuff for you to make?" And she's like, "I got it in the Reach store. It was fabric." And unbelievable talent. And it was that perseverance. And it was that finding the survivor within and encouraging that survivor within that really makes a significant difference. And so we were able to reconcile her with her mother. Her father and mother had divorced, fortunately, and he was out of the picture. But we were able to, again, with telehealth because of the pandemic and other things, but we're using telehealth. If they're not in the area, we can re-engage with family if it's appropriate, if they're not the trafficker, or to reconcile them in a supportive environment. So can leave us, and she was with us probably about 9 months, being able to move her on. So we hear from her regularly because we do follow up, and she continues to thrive and has finished her GED and is enrolled in college.
So encouraging. Every single story. So what's one thing, we have 2 questions left. Dee, what is something that's, I could say a gap, or maybe we need to work on, or that Samaritan Village needs?
Yeah, I think if there was a theme right now in our kind of anti-trafficking community, it's employment opportunities for these ladies. When they leave our programs, they still need to create a life for themselves. And how do they do that? And when you've got extensive, criminal histories and things like that, you're kind of shut out of opportunities. And more so, I think personal passion for me is not just to offer them a job. Just take whatever we think you deserve, right? It's no, these women are just like us, and they have passions and talents and gifts. And if more people could see that and say, "I'm going to look past your past because I now understand where it comes from," right? To me, I feel like that's a gap in our community, is being able to offer women opportunities to be able to advance vocationally and educationally.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie?
So one thing, that's something we are really, really about to right now is finding that and having women who get jobs, because that is a huge thing that we're dealing with too. We in Virginia, in the house in Virginia, last October, I believe it was, so just over a year ago now, we had a lady who was in the program and finished it and was on her own and was working and doing well, and got wrapped up in something and was found dead in her hotel room. And that really shook everybody in Virginia. It shook us here, because there was just this, why didn't she reach out, or was she not ready? And all these questions that came out of what could we have done? What were we supposed to do? Were we supposed to think of for probation back then? Like, would have that helped? And it really came down to we need that continuing up here. We need that after she leaves, what does that look like? And more than to say, hey, reach out to us anytime, because we'll say that. I'll say that every time. But really that follow through. And so with that, one of the things Leticia's house is really looking at too is looking at, both in Virginia and Florida, are forever homes. And so transitional type like Samaritan Village and like Jill, they're doing at Lifeboat, is a community of what we're looking at is like tiny houses on a property where we kind of have like a little village for these women to come and live with their children and have housing opportunities to continue after the program. And so to have that support, to have somebody to say, hey, how are you? And you're loved, and let's go to, celebrate recovery together, or let's go do this, and keeping a site director on property who's there to help these ladies and somewhere they can be for 2 to 3 years as they can save up to then be able to put a down payment on a house. And so that is something that we've started. We're way newer in the process, but in both Virginia and Florida have been looking at properties and have raised some funds for these tiny houses.
Wow, that's a great idea. And Jill, I know that's been your vision too for many years, is that affordable housing. And so that's something that I think we need to address. Those who are listening, or those who have influence either in your capital here in Florida, in Tallahassee, or those who even go to Washington. I know you do, Jill, as well. That affordable housing is just huge, more than ever. And I think that one of the things is having something you own, right, is different than just, renting or being somewhere. And I think that's super empowering. So much success, Stephanie and Leticia's home for, you guys, just hopefully that develops. And if there's a funder listening, we're going to tell you how to get involved in a little bit. So Jill, what's still needed?
So housing and wraparound services, it's just that lifelong care, as long as they, as long as they want to be with you. And again, this is where community comes in. This is where you have to pull your community partners in to build that safety net, those teams that are around them that, do they like to knit? Do they like to sew? Are they a musician? Are they interested in banking? Pull those community partners in to help. But housing is the most important thing. We had thought, well, for many years, because, I've been working on this over a decade now, and we had devised putting a community of tiny houses. We had talked about that. But then I think the more that I looked at it, I really do not want to put a whole group of vulnerable people in the same area together. Sometimes I think with the triggers, even within our housing situation, our safe house are apartments. It's a quadruplex. There's apartments there. So I can keep it fluid. I can keep it moving. If people are upset in the apple cart, then I need to move them down to another place. Even in our transitional homes, I really don't believe in putting more than 2 survivors living together. That 3rd, 4th, 5th dynamic, there's always some drama. Now I will if we have to, because we're really short on, but I don't know. I think I've been doing this a long time and working nationally and seeing kind of what's working. And I'm a firm believer that just build those smaller relationships and not put everybody all in together. So we'll see. I believe in scattered housing. I think it's healthier.
Sure. And that's usually short term when they do have to be more in the group setting.
Yeah.
Dr. Toll, what are some gaps?
I want to take it in a little bit different direction and talk about parity.
Okay.
Parity is equal expenditures of medical services and behavioral health care services. Parity has been federal law since 1999. And we all know that behavioral health care in general is not, most of it's not short-term treatment, because it really can be a lifelong process. I like to think in terms of disease management. And yet, the law has been existing since 1999. So there is not equal financial expenditure. So, you may have a plan, if you have a plan, 26 visits a year, and that's all you get. Treatment for trauma and treatment for those surviving human trafficking is not short-term treatment. And so the need to put some teeth in the law, again, federal law since 1999, and yet we still don't have equal expenditures. There are limitations to behavioral health care. There are limits to how long you can stay in the hospital. There's limits to how many outpatient visits you can have. There's limits as to whether or not this aspect of behavioral health care is a covered benefit. So parity is really key. So when we talk about it with legislators and with others, the law exists, but there's not enough in the law to say insurance companies and others, you need to have equal dollars that are spending. So you go in for cancer treatment, and they don't stop in the middle of your radiation. You need 35 sessions, so we're going to give you 17 and a half. You get you get all that you need, and that's what's really key.
So that, tells me the advocacy for mental health is critical still.
Very critical.
State level and federal.
But Tomas, this is a subject, and all of us have boards. And, I have one that came off of the cancer board, and he's raised tens of millions of dollars. And he says, my God, he goes, they want to shut their doors in my face when they hear me come and talking about human trafficking. He goes, it's just not as easy. And the perception is that these are just prostitutes and people that just made bad choices. Period. Well, this morning we had our fundraising breakfast, and our male survivor spoke with his family on there that had not a clue what was going on, and what a rude awakening that it was there. And so I think I've always said, if we start looking at it like it's torture, because that's what it is. When you have to sleep with that many people, this is torture on a body and a human being. And so if we take it out of the dark seediness and call it what it is, then I think that there may be, can we approach mental health extensions on getting help? We're going to pick somebody up or having somebody brought to us today because they're Baker acted out and they got to get out. Can you keep them another night? Nope. Okay, seriously, what is it going to hurt that you can't keep him another night? But they can't. So we're going to take him, see what we get, but Dr. Phil's right. That's what we need. They've got to have that continuum it goes on forever when there's that kind of trauma.
Last question, and thank you, everyone. So how can people get involved with Samaritan Village? Dee, tell us, what are some steps, or where do we go?
Yeah, absolutely. So we love for people to get involved with us. You can volunteer directly with our safe house. You go through training. Actually, just yesterday we did our monthly training. We do a training every last Wednesday of the month virtually, and you'll learn all about the things we've talked about here and more. And then we also have a resale boutique located on East Colonial called Transitions Resale. And it is a women's boutique, and it serves a couple different purposes for our organization. One, it's a funding vehicle for the program. So people donate their clothes, like you and I, we clean out our closets, we Marie Kondo our houses, and then we donate those items to the resale store. And every penny that is resold there goes right back into our program. And you can also shop it. We're right near Baldwin Park, so we get some really nice stuff in there. The other purpose that it serves is to be a training ground for the ladies that are in our program. So as a part of our program, they get to volunteer in the store. It also serves when they need community service hours, that they're court mandated to community service hours, that we can physically sign off on those hours for them. And then 3, it's an outreach platform. So if you want to learn more about us or connect with us in person, that is the place to do so. So those are just a couple ways to get involved. And then you can always visit our website, SamaritanVillage.net, not .org, .net. And we have a number of things, our expansion being one of them. We have right now a campaign called Adopt a Room, where you can gather your church friends, your family, your networks, and say, hey, we want to furnish and design and decorate a room in one of our new safe houses. And so you can do that there. So
great.
Thanks.
Congratulations on your expansion.
Thank you.
As well. Thank you. Stephanie, how can we help Leticia's home?
So we love volunteers, especially if there is something that you have that you're like, I am, really into fitness, and I think I could put up a really good curriculum and come and do this with the ladies. It's great. And again, with the community and bringing in different people so that they're with, we also provide training beforehand too, and go through go through a little interview process, but that's through our website. If you go to leticiashouse.com, and there's an area, it also shows like what we always need. There's always different things and donations. So if you have a group that you want to get together and people like to do drives and everything, we're always accepting for whether it's clothing, because we have a little, not like a resale, but just a little boutique in our house. So when a lady comes in, we have, sometimes we've had ladies come in and from jail with their brown paper bag that has, some papers, if anything. And so come in and be able to get clothes and everything. And then as they're in the program at different times and as needed, having clothes, especially before they work and as the seasons change and everything. And also just the toiletries and anything like that. So there's a list on our website. But there's also other opportunities of, we've had like serve days. We've had some like local churches do serve days that they've come and helped with the manicuring the lawn. There's still some repairs. Our house, when we got it, was in total disrepair. And so we're still 2 years later trying to fix some things up. We still have a patio that we're trying to, with a beautiful pool, but we're still trying to get it screened and doing some stuff. So there's plenty of opportunities to get involved.
And what's your website again?
LeticiasHouse.com.
.com. All right. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank
Jill?
you.
Well, we have 5 properties. One is 5 acres. That's our main office. And we do several things there. So training classes or whatever. So there's always work that needs done around there. God love my 86-year-old father. I think that's what's keeping him alive. He's there every day to help work. But our safe house, like I said, is 14 beds. It's a pretty big facility. So we're always looking for training some shelter staff that might want to come in. I know that UCF, some of the psychology students have wanted to come in and do some, work there. So we have transitional homes that there's things that can be done there, that we've had people with certain talents that want to come in and maybe do a class, and the women or men now are open to, whatever. Again, we don't force them to do anything. We kind of see what they like and then look through our volunteer list of who might be able to plug into them. We do trainings once or twice a month, depending on how many people we have. It's by Zoom. I'll be so glad when we can all get back to life as we knew it and meet in person and really have that one-on-one contact.
Jill, what's your website? How do people get a hold of you?
You just go to thelifeboatproject.org. And all the information is there, and you can reach out if you want us to come speak or whatever it is that you need.
Great.
And Tomas, if you don't mind me,
yes.
Sorry. One other thing too, and we spoke on it earlier, is if there was any known or job opportunities or anything or ways to connect, there's always trying to build those partnerships up and opportunities for those that we serve.
Dr. Toll?
I can just say ditto. Everything, certainly, goods and supplies and things that people are very willing to contribute to. And also, and if you have we often have people with very special skill sets. We have women that come in and, teach them how to sew and donate the sewing machine. So we have, 6 sewing machines, and we had one of our techs actually repairing one of the sewing machines. So anything and everything that's a special talent. We had an auditor that came in to do a report, and she learned of us, and she comes back and she does yoga, or she was before the pandemic, she was coming back and doing yoga, and she will return after everything's safe to return. So anything, a special skill and talent, because like Dee and others have referred to, they're helping them to tap into their own special talents, and they don't know them yet. And so a wide variety of things. So they may not be interested in sewing at all, but they're interested in, art, and they become a gifted artist. So we're always open. It's aspirehealthpartners.org or .com. You can go either way. And we look at those and they get funneled to me if it's one of my programs.
And Phil, how do we get in touch with Aspire?
Just get the website, aspirehealthpartners.org. Or .com.
Or .com, both. Okay. So we have time for one question that I'm seeing up here. So how is recovery different when the trafficker is a family member? Who would like to answer that. How is recovery different when the traffickers, so that I'm thinking they're asking because of familiarity, right, of that family member.
I'll give my initial thoughts and then let the doctor take the rest of the answer. But my thoughts are this. One of the things that I think, I don't know if it's a difference, but I would just say as we think about that question, the thought that pops in my head is that what traffickers do is they try to, part of their appeal, right, especially if somebody's vulnerability is that they lacked parental guidance or love or affection or attention, is that they kind of set up that situation so that there is a feeling of, this is my daddy, this is my family, right? So there's that sick dynamic that traffickers do. So while there is probably some very distinct differences in terms of the trauma piece, that same, what would I say, like the brainwashing or even the love and loyalty to that trafficker still remains, whether it's their mother or whether it was a boyfriend. So I don't know, you guys might have some other thoughts, but that's just kind of what I was thinking.
I think there's an additional significant issue related to trust. You know, it goes across the board for when our parents violate that trust. But when we talk about it from a trafficking perspective, when I refer to it as the parental wound, the people in the world who should be keeping us safe, keeping us healthy, keeping us whole, are the very ones that are exploiting us. That's a wound that's very, very difficult. So clearly the trauma is great and they do function in those roles, but when it's a parent who violated you, it's hard to come back from that. So really focusing on, because all of us can perhaps dismiss the one who took advantage of us because they didn't know us, they didn't know who we were, you know, or you became my boyfriend or girlfriend because you wanted to do this. But when it's your mother or your father or your grandfather or your uncle or your aunt, it's very difficult. So really working too, because that's where their self-esteem is destroyed. You know, my own mother. You know, so clearly I'm unlovable. We don't go to the place where it's something wrong with mom. We go to the place that's like, how was I so unlovable that even my own mother couldn't care for me? And so working that angle and really helping them. And one of the greatest strategies is cognitive behavioral therapy, really beginning to shift the way they think in order to develop a much greater sense of self-esteem and self-worth. Again, not short-term treatment.
There was a case that, because Lifeboat is a member of the Freedom Network USA, one of our member partners had a case that they were working on, and the daughter was being trafficked by the family, by the mother and the father, and just didn't really want to work with law enforcement. They thought, no, just kind of sweep it under the rug. She moves across the country. She gets word that they're now selling her sister. And so then she said, you know what, I can't do it for myself, but I'm going to do it for my sibling. And so sometimes it does take that. They bear the torture themselves and don't want to rat the whole family out when this sickness is going on. But then when they're protecting the other family members, the light bulb goes off.
Wow, we are out of time, believe it or not. But I want to thank Dee Coleman, Stephanie O'Connor, Jill Cohen, and Dr. Phil Toll. You're amazing guests today, and thank you for taking time. You could be anywhere. I know you're all very busy, and thank you for being here. This is significant. We are recording it, so folks can go back and see it. And if you want a copy, I want to thank Lifeboat Project for sponsoring this panel today. So I want to thank, let's give them a big hand.